I'm speaking on the social dialogue in the German construction industry. I published a book with a colleague of mine from our institute. We did a research on the German construction industry. We carried out about 60 interviews with social partners, company directors, and trade unionists, works councillors, and many other people. And analyzed data on the fluctuation, turnover, wages, and whatever all data we found on this industry. And I will speak on some aspects of the social dialogue. I have to start with some remarks on the specificities of the industry, because I'm not speaking on the social dialogue in Germany, but in the construction industry. In the construction industry, it's different because there are specificities in these industries. And the first one is buildings are always designed for specific places, and they are always to some extent unique. It's not mass production, which is repeated. And there are also limits to automatization, and I don't believe in these figures of 90% of automatization. And it's not a stationary production, but there are mobile factors with different composition of employees, companies, and trades. Each site is different. And because there are so many trades, specialized trades, there has always been a high proportion of subcontractors based on competence, not on prices in the past. And large construction projects are carried out by many small companies. And because of the local nature of construction, globalization has a different form. In the manufacturing industry, you export products. In the construction industry, you import workers. And what is very important is, which was already mentioned, the high instability of employment due to high economic cyclicality and weather dependency. And there's a high turnover of employees and also of companies in this industry. And there's a high dependence, high proportion of skilled workers required, and there are requirements for autonomous actions on the construction site. At least in Germany, not in all countries. The duration of training is very different in many countries. And what we can observe, and this is a crucial point for social dialogue, there's a complete market failure in training due to low employment stability. If you don't have institutions, there will rarely take place any training unless the state is paying everything. And there's high physical stress and above risk of accidents. So the question of social security, pensions is important. So these are general remarks on the industry. And you find it in a book I published with Peter Phillips from the US on the building chaos from 2003. We analyzed these specificities. So the German construction labor market. I start with the 50s. And at this time, it was a sector with very unstable employment. We had a massive winter unemployment, 600,000 unemployed in the winter and 40,000 in the summer, and a declining willingness to train. And the problems of the instability for the workers were loss of income, low pensions, and often the holiday entitlements forfeited with frequent changes of companies. And for the companies, too low training rates, lack of skilled workers, and strong migration to other industries. And therefore, in the 50s, the social partners decided to try to normalize the construction labor market and to try to normalize the working conditions and to create stable employment. The first is actors and instruments, and the prerequisite for social dialogue are actors which are capable of action at national level, if you regulate the labor market at national level. And the actors, we don't have the trade union pluralism in this industry. We have one big union, the IG Bau, and the collective bargaining is centralized at national level. And we have two employers' federation, one for the craft trades and one for the big companies. They have completely decentralized structures, but they delegate the power to negotiate collective bargaining to their national federations. And the instruments are general binding national collective agreements and a levy finance social funds. I will explain what the social funds mean at industry level, which are based on a collective agreements. They are not a state institution like in Quebec. And also important is the joint representation of the social partners vis-a-vis politicians, because the state is very important for some regulations, and some regulations are co-financed by the social funds and the state. So the lobbying, political lobbying, is absolutely important. So I speak about the social funds. We call it SOCABAU, which is an institution with about 1,122 employees in Wiesbaden, the city near Frankfurt. The roots are going back to the 20s. And it's a parity administered institution. Only the social partners, the state is not represented. And this institution is based on a generally binding collective agreement, which is extended by the state, and it's financed by a levy of 20% of gross income. So 20% of all gross income is going each month to the SOCABAU, to the social funds. And what are the social funds doing with that? I don't go into history. This has developed since the 50s. What they are doing now is they are financing vocational training, parts of it, not everything. They are financing the salaries for 6 weeks of holidays per year. So if you change your job 3 or 4 times, it doesn't matter. You have entitlement of 6 weeks, and you get your salary for these 6 weeks from the social funds. I think platform workers could dream of that. That would be a good model. And there is a supplementary pension for construction workers because of the high mobility, etc., and unemployment in between. The usual entitlements are lower than in other industries. And there's a co-financing of a seasonal short-time allowance. This is the old bad weather allowance, which also exists in other European countries like France or Belgium, Netherlands, and Denmark. And then the SOCABAU is offering services like administration of managing of working time accounts. And what does this mean? This means that at industry level, you have a kind of ideal joint employer for all companies, which is very important because we have 80,000 construction companies, and the size of the companies was shrinking from 20 to now about 9 or 10. So we have a increased fragmentation of this industry due to a new form of cost-orientated outsourcing, which partly supplemented or which strongly supplemented the outsourcing based on competence. And the benefits are linked to industry affiliation, and the aim is to promote vocational training and prevent employment churn. So I give you a flavor of some of these activities of the social funds. The first is vocational training. We have a strong apprenticeship system in Germany. Apprenticeship lasts 3 years for construction workers. You have a shorter version of 2 years, but usually a bricklayer or roofer has a 3-year training. In England, it's 1 year. In Italy, 2. In Denmark, it's 3.5 years. This means if you have such a training, you can act autonomously, you can read plans, etc. You don't need supervisors, which is not the case in many other countries. What we could observe is that the apprenticeship rate fell from 10% in the 50s to 1.8%. So this was really this was a disaster because there was no reproduction of the skilled workers. You need an apprenticeship rate of about 10% because of high turnover and migration to other industries. And what were the reasons? Increasing cost competition, fear of loss of training investment due to high turnover, and also increasing quality demands because the construction work changed. So in the 70s, mid-70s, the social partners decided on their own, without any state pressure, to introduce a levy for training. And the levy is about 2.3% for the training. And the companies get reimbursed about 50% of the training allowance. And when the levy was introduced, the training allowance for the apprentices was doubled to make the industry more attractive. And there was a quality boost because now, since then, all apprentices go to 36 weeks within the 3 years in one of the 190 training centers. And this is completely financed. These are boarding schools. This is completely financed by the system, including the travel costs. In 21, more than 400 million euro were financed, were paid to the social funds, and you can see 290 went back to the companies for reimbursement, and the rest went into the financing of the external training, and the apprenticeship rate increased then up to 10% after German unification, and it's now at around 5.2, which is too low. It has to be increased, and the training. This was interesting in the Canadian presentation. It was said you need the skills have to be changed, and more cross-cutting elements have to be, and that's what we have. We have for 19 now. These are 19 trade profiles, bricklayer, etc. And in the first year, they have a common training. It's not a differentiation between the different trades. In the second year, they still have common training in groups for building, finishing, and civil engineering, and the real specialization starts in the third year. So this means there are not so many interface problem on the construction side, because these people always meet on construction side and have to communicate with each other, and they know what the others are doing. This is very important for efficiency. So, and another point is the seasonal short-time allowance. We don't have winters like in Canada. In Quebec, I saw on figures that new construction workers only work 800 hours a year, because in the winter they cannot work. We have in the south of Germany stronger winters, and in 59 the social partners said, well, our high winter unemployment, this will destroy our industries, because the people are now going in other industries, in the metal industry, etc. So they are leaving the industry. We have to give them more social security, and the hire and fire in the winter is not acceptable. So there was introduced a kind of short-time scheme, co-financed by the unemployment insurance and social funds. And some elements of these social contributions and the public holidays, Christmas, New Year, were financed by the social funds. The rest by the unemployment insurance. And winter unemployment was nearly disappeared. It was still existed, but it nearly disappeared. But then the state withdrew in the neoliberal phase in the German politics and said, well, the industry should finance everything through the levy system. Even take over the costs for unemployment allowances, which was not the case in other industries. So winter unemployment returned, and then in 2005, a compromise was found between unions and employers. And I had heard wonderful stories. They met 4 days in a hotel separated on the countryside, and it was negotiations like on the bazaar. And in the end, they found a solution. So we have now a short-time allowance for all kinds of work stoppages, weather-related or order-related, in between December and March. The unemployment insurance finances the short-time allowance. The so-called BAU, the social funds, finances other elements, also incentives. If companies continue to produce in the winter, then you get a supplement for each hour, because this is costly. You have to protect the site, etc. And the compromise you can see was that the first time the employees paid part of this extra level. this was a compromise they finally found. It was proposed by the unions to save the system. And continued employment is now cost neutral in the winter for the company, so they have no reason to dismiss people. And what you can see on the top is these are the fluctuations in employment. And then the second line, you can see the fluctuation in hours, and you can see that the fluctuation in hours are much stronger than in employment. And this is the stabilizing effect of these allowance. My last point is we have an increasing share of posted workers from other countries, mainly EU countries. This is I could talk an hour on this. And you can see that in the construction industry, there's a high share, more than 100,000 in 2019. And we have, at that time, we had about 800,000 in main construction, and the regulations I described cover main construction, not the painters, not the electricians. And so it's more than 10%. So it's quite substantial. And there's a competitive advantage for agency and posted workers. If there's no regulations, they do not have to pay the levy of 20%. And they can undercut the standards of the industry. So therefore, there were specific construction labor market regulations. One already in the 80s, agency work was only allowed within the industry. But agencies not in the industry could not send workers to the construction industry. Only those who also have to pay the 20% could provide agency workers. And the foreign posted workers, they have to pay the levy for the vacation salaries. Therefore, we have a registration of posted workers, the only industry where we really know how many are there. And we had, I saw in the Canadian case, you had at least the same pay rates. In Germany, the pay rates are not declared as generally binding, but we had specific industry minimum wages even for skilled workers, 16 euro for skilled workers, but the employers at this moment do not want this. The small employers, the big ones want it. There's a conflict on the employer side, so we don't have this regulation anymore. And here you can see in black, these are the posted workers. You can see that they are in group 1 or 2. These are below the classification of the skilled workers. Skilled workers are in group 3 and the following. So we know at least that they are lower skilled, but they are partly covered, and this is kind of equalizing or creating a level playing field. So what we can observe is a real normalization of employment relationships. An increase of training through the levy systems. The free riders have to pay, and the condition for sectoral regulation is consensus and strong social partners. As a problem is they are getting weaker. Trade union density and also employer density is declining, and especially through the inflow of cheap labor from other countries. And but I think these kind of social funds is an excellent model which can be extended to many other areas of precarious work. And these are the books. In white is a new version. I already wrote a book with another colleague 20 years ago, and the good result. It's you mentioned, Gregor, published and perished. I think the good news was that the union bought 200 copies of the book and the employers 100 copies. So I think I regard this as a big success. Not only academics are reading the book. Thank you.